The rain came down in cold, relentless sheets over Manhattan, turning the pavement outside the Hastings townhouse into a mirror of shattered light. Amelia Mia Caldwell stood barefoot on the stone steps of the Upper East Side mansion, one hand wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. 3 heartbeats lived inside her. Behind her, the heavy mahogany doors closed with a final, echoing thud. "Mrs. Hastings has asked you to leave immediately," the security guard had said, unable to meet her eyes. Asked. Mia tasted blood where she had bitten the inside of her cheek to keep from sobbing. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't screaming. That almost made it worse. Her suitcase, the small silver carry-on she used for weekend trips to the Hamptons, was tossed onto the wet pavement beside her. It looked painfully out of place beneath the glowing Manhattan skyline. Inside the house, through tall windows framed by silk drapes, she could still see crystal chandeliers flickering. Eleanor Hastings stood rigid in the foyer, posture sharp as a blade, her silk blouse untouched by the storm she had created. "You trapped my son," Eleanor had said minutes earlier, her voice calm and lethal, "and I won't allow you to destroy this family's reputation." Mia's fingers trembled over her belly. Triplets. She had found out that morning at Mount Sinai. She had planned to surprise Christopher with the ultrasound photos. Instead, he had stood silently beside his mother, while accusations filled the room like smoke. "You should go, Mia," Christopher had whispered, eyes fixed on the marble floor. "Just until things calm down." Just until. Lightning cracked above Fifth Avenue, and Mia felt a sharp tightening in her abdomen. Stress contraction. She inhaled, steady but shallow. Across the street, a black Mercedes idled at the curb. The driver looked away, pretending not to witness the exile of a pregnant woman. Mia bent slowly, picking up her suitcase, as another wave of pain rippled through her. She had no idea that at that exact moment, an unread email sat glowing on her iPhone inside that suitcase. Subject line: Confidential Trust Release. $100 million. And the people who had just thrown her out had no idea what they had truly lost. The taxi ride downtown felt longer than it should have. Rain streaked across the window in crooked lines, blurring the gold lights of Park Avenue into something distant and unreachable. Maya sat in the back seat, one hand gripping the leather strap of her purse, the other resting protectively over her stomach. 3 babies. And a husband who had just watched her get erased. Her phone buzzed once inside the suitcase at her feet, but she didn't hear it. All she could hear was Christopher's voice repeating in her head. Just until things calm down. The words had sounded almost gentle, almost reasonable. That was the cruelty of it. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't defended her either. He had simply stepped back and let his mother lead. Mia replayed the moment in the foyer, Eleanor's voice cutting through the marble hall, the family portrait above the staircase, Christopher standing beneath it, shoulders tense, fingers tapping against the side of his Rolex as if calculating stock prices instead of choosing his wife. "Chris," she had whispered, "well, look at me." He hadn't. He stared at the polished floor while security waited for instructions. Now, as the taxi stopped at a red light near Fifth Avenue, Mia pressed her forehead gently against the cool glass. A soft tightening rolled through her abdomen again. Not strong, but there. Stress. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded automatically. "Yes, just tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of proving she wasn't a threat." Christopher hadn't called. Not once. She unlocked her phone with shaking fingers, half expecting at least a message. The screen lit up. Missed call. Unknown number. Email notification. She ignored both and opened her messages. Nothing from him. Instead, there was a short text from his assistant. "Mr. Hastings will be unavailable for the next few days." Unavailable. Mia let out a quiet breath that trembled at the edges. Her husband hadn't chosen her. He had chosen silence. And in powerful families like the Hastings, silence wasn't weakness. It was alignment. As the taxi pulled away from the curb again, Mia felt something shift inside her. Not the babies. Something colder. If Christopher believed this storm would simply pass, he had misunderstood the woman he married. Because tonight, he hadn't just let her leave. He had let something far bigger slip through his hands. By the time the taxi reached Mount Sinai Hospital, Mia's contractions were no longer subtle. They weren't dramatic either, just steady, persistent, like a warning knocking quietly at the door. The sliding glass doors opened with a rush of fluorescent light and antiseptic air. Maya stepped inside alone, our rainwater still clinging to the hem of her dress. The lobby gleamed, polished floors, soft overhead lighting, nurses moving with practiced urgency. 30 weeks. Triplets, she told the intake nurse, her voice controlled but thin. Stress-induced contractions. That got attention. Within minutes, she was in a triage room, monitors strapped around her abdomen. The rhythmic sound filled the space. Thump, 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 thump. 3 heartbeats. Dr. Naomi Brooks entered quickly, her expression sharp but kind. Mia, talk to me. What happened? Mia hesitated. How did you summarize humiliation? Exile. A husband who looked away? I was asked to leave my home tonight, she said finally. Naomi didn't press for details. She didn't need to. She adjusted the monitor and studied the screen. The babies are responding to your stress, she said gently. Your body thinks it's under threat. Another contraction tightened, sharper this time. Mia gripped the edge of the hospital bed. I can't lose them, she whispered. You're not going to, Naomi replied firmly. But you have to calm down. Calm down, as if her world hadn't just collapsed. A nurse dimmed the lights. The room softened into shadow except for the glow of the heart monitor. Outside the window, Manhattan shimmered, distant and indifferent. Maya stared at the ceiling, breathing slowly like she'd practiced in prenatal class. Inhale. Exhale. She had planned to show Christopher the ultrasound that morning. 3 tiny shapes, 3 flickering pulses of life. She had imagined his surprise, his arms around her. Instead, she was alone under hospital lights, while her children fought the stress she couldn't shield them from. Her phone buzzed again on the bedside table. Naomi glanced at it. Want me to get that? Mia shook her head. Not if it's him. Not if it's silence again. The contraction monitor steadied slightly after medication was administered. The rhythm softened. For now, the babies were holding on. But as Mia closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her under, one thought lingered heavier than fear. If Christopher could stand still while she was thrown out carrying his children, what else was he capable of standing still for? The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of machines and the faint hum of Manhattan traffic far below. Midnight had passed. The city glittered beyond the window, like nothing had changed. But everything had. Mia lay propped against stiff white pillows, an IV line taped gently to her wrist. The medication had slowed the contractions, but her body still felt fragile, like glass holding 3 fragile flames inside it. On the small rolling table beside her bed sat her silver suitcase. Rain-dried now, slightly scuffed from where it had hit the pavement. A nurse had placed her belongings neatly on top. Wallet, prenatal vitamins, and her iPhone. The screen lit up again. 1 missed call. Unknown number. 3 unread emails. Maya stared at the notifications without touching them. She expected Christopher's name to appear eventually. An apology. A command. Something. Instead, the sender line read, Adrian Cole, Cole and Whitaker Trust Law, San Francisco. Her brow tightened. She didn't know any Adrian Cole. The subject line felt overly formal, almost cold. Confidential. Urgent trust disbursement. Notice. Mia exhaled slowly. It had to be a mistake. Spam. A scam disguised to look official. Wealthy families attracted those things. She locked the phone and set it face down. Across town, in a high-rise office overlooking the dark sweep of the Hudson River, a man in a charcoal suit stood alone beneath recessed lighting. Adrian Cole watched his computer screen, jaw set tight. The trust had been triggered at 8:42 p.m. He had expected Amelia Caldwell Hastings to respond immediately. Instead, there had been silence. He checked the file again. Signed by Arthur Caldwell, executed 6 months before his death. Primary beneficiary, Amelia Rose Caldwell. Total asset valuation at release, $100 million. Adrian rubbed his temple. If she had not yet seen the notice, that meant she was unaware. No, and if she was unaware, then the Hastings family was operating in the dark. Back in the hospital room, Mia turned onto her side carefully, one hand resting over her abdomen. The monitors continued their steady reassurance. 3 heartbeats. Outside, the skyline shimmered, powerful, untouchable. Inside that quiet room, a woman who believed she had lost everything lay inches away from the notification that would change the balance of power entirely. And the people who had cast her out were still sleeping peacefully in a townhouse that no longer held the upper hand. Morning light slipped through the thin hospital curtains, pale and fragile. Mia woke to the soft beeping of monitors and the dull ache of exhaustion behind her eyes. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the rain, the door closing, Christopher's silence, for her phone rested beside her pillow. 3 unread emails. This time, she opened it. The message expanded across the screen in clean, precise formatting. Ms. Amelia Rose Caldwell. This notice confirms the activation and immediate release eligibility of the Arthur Caldwell Irrevocable Trust. Her breath slowed. She skimmed downward, expecting fine print about distant relatives or procedural delays. Instead, her vision fixed on a number so large it felt abstract. Total asset valuation at release, $100 million. Mia blinked. Once. Twice. Her grandfather had been wealthy. Quietly. Carefully. But she had never imagined this. Her thumb trembled as she continued reading. FOD Disbursement Condition Clause 7. B. Full independent access to trust funds is contingent upon the beneficiary maintaining legal and financial independence from marital co-ownership structures. Her stomach tightened. Not from contractions this time. Legal and financial independence. Another paragraph followed. In the event the beneficiary resides within or is financially dependent upon the Hastings family estate, trust access will be suspended for a period of 10 years. Mia sat upright too quickly. The monitor wires shifted against her skin. 10 years. Her grandfather had known. He had anticipated something. She reread the clause slowly. If she had stayed in the Hastings townhouse, if she had allowed herself to remain under their financial control, the entire inheritance would have been frozen. The air in the hospital room felt thinner. They hadn't just thrown her out. They had unknowingly freed her. Her phone rang suddenly. Unknown number. This time, she answered. Ms. Caldwell, a calm male voice said, "This is Adrian Cole. I represent your grandfather's estate. I assume you've read the notice." Maya swallowed. "Is it real?" "Yes," he replied. "And there is something else you need to understand." A pause. "Your grandfather amended the trust 6 months ago, specifically after reviewing the Hastings family's financial structure." Mia's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" "It means," Adrian said carefully, "he believed you would need protection." Silence settled between them, heavy but steady. Mia looked down at her abdomen. 3 heartbeats pulsed beneath her palm. For the first time since standing in the rain, she felt something unfamiliar rise inside her. Not fear, not humiliation. Power. By noon, the Hastings townhouse on the Upper East Side felt different. The air inside the marble foyer was tight, charged with something sharp and invisible. Eleanor Hastings stood near the long console table beneath the family portrait, her fingers resting lightly on a Mont Blanc pen, as if it were a weapon rather than a writing instrument. Across from her, a private banker from Wall Street adjusted his cufflinks and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hastings," he began carefully, "a significant trust transfer was triggered last night under Amelia Caldwell's name." Eleanor's expression didn't shift. "What kind of transfer?" $100 million. Silence expanded through the room. Christopher, who had been pacing near the window overlooking Fifth Avenue, had stopped mid-step. "That's impossible," he said. The banker opened a slim leather folder and slid documents across the polished table. The Arthur Caldwell Irrevocable Trust. Activated at 8:42 p.m. Funds pending confirmation of beneficiary independence. Christopher's pulse began to pound in his ears. Independence. He replayed the timeline in his head. 8:42 p.m. That was minutes before security escorted Mia out. Eleanor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is the trust accessible?" she asked. "Only if Mrs. Caldwell is legally and financially separate from this household." Christopher's stomach dropped. Separate. The word landed heavier than any accusation the night before. Eleanor's mind moved quickly, faster than panic, faster than guilt. "If she is currently residing elsewhere," she said calmly, "no, then the condition may already be satisfied." The banker nodded slightly. "If that is the case, the funds will be fully released within 72 hours. Christopher stepped back, his mind racing. They had pushed her out to protect their family name, and in doing so, they had handed her absolute financial power. Eleanor turned slowly toward her son. "You will contact her," she said. "Immediately." Christopher hesitated. Last night, he had let her walk into the rain carrying his children. Now, the stakes had changed. Not because of the babies, because of the money. He reached for his phone. For the first time since the door had closed behind Mia, urgency replaced silence. But what he didn't understand, what neither of them understood, was that the balance had already shifted, and Amelia Caldwell was no longer the woman standing barefoot in the storm. Mia was sitting upright in her hospital bed when Christopher's name finally lit up her screen. For a moment, she simply stared at it. The name that had been silent while she stood in the rain. The name that had not called when she was admitted for early contractions. Now, it was glowing insistently. She answered. "Mia." Christopher's voice came quickly, breathless. "Why didn't you tell me?" She almost laughed. "Tell you what?" "The trust," he said. No hesitation, no confusion. "The $100 million. I just spoke to the bank." There it was. Not. "Are you okay?" Not. "How are the babies?" The trust. Mia felt something inside her settle into place. "I didn't know," she said evenly, "until this morning." There was a pause on the other end. She could almost hear him recalculating. "Listen," Christopher continued, softer now. "Last night got out of control. My mother overreacted. We both did. We both." Mia looked down at the hospital bracelet around her wrist, her name printed in black ink. No Hastings attached. "You watched," she said quietly. "You didn't stop it." He exhaled sharply. "I was trying to protect the situation." "From what?" she asked. Silence. From scandal? From gossip on Fifth Avenue? From headlines? Or from losing access to something he hadn't known existed? Christopher's tone shifted again, warmer, Come home. Let's fix this. The babies deserve stability. There it was. Not love. Strategy. Mia rested her palm over her stomach as one of the babies shifted gently beneath her skin. They deserve peace, she replied. And they'll have it, Christopher insisted. Or we'll handle the trust together. Together. The word felt foreign now. Mia closed her eyes briefly. Last night, she had been a liability. Today, she was leverage. Chris, she said slowly, if the money didn't exist, would you still be calling? He didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said more than any apology. I'm coming to the hospital, he finally said. Mia opened her eyes. No, she replied calmly. You're not. And for the first time since the storm began, she ended the call. Not him. Her. Christopher arrived anyway, not inside the hospital room. Security stopped him at the maternity floor. But he waited downstairs in the polished lobby, pacing near a display of fresh white orchids, as if he still belonged in control of something. Mia didn't go down. Instead, Adrian Cole walked in. He was taller than she expected, or early 40s, composed. His charcoal suit was understated but precise, the kind worn by men who understood long-term consequences. He introduced himself quietly and placed a slim tablet on the hospital tray beside her bed. There's something you need to see, he said. Mia's chest tightened. About the trust? Indirectly. He tapped the screen. Security footage filled the display. The Hastings foyer, the marble floor, the chandelier, and her. Standing there the night before, pale and stunned. The angle showed more than she had realized. Eleanor speaking calmly, Christopher standing several feet away. Not shocked, not confused, prepared. The timestamp read 8:31 p.m. Eleanor's voice echoed faintly through the footage. If she leaves voluntarily tonight, the optics remain clean. Mia's pulse stuttered. Christopher responded, too low but audible. And if she doesn't? Eleanor didn't hesitate. Then we make it uncomfortable enough that she will. The air left Mia's lungs. They knew, she whispered. Adrian nodded once. The trust activation occurred 11 minutes later. Your grandfather's estate monitors public financial shifts connected to the Hastings holdings. He amended the clause 6 months ago. Why? Because he suspected they were positioning you for removal. Mia stared at the frozen image on the tablet. Christopher turning his wrist, glancing at his watch as if timing her breakdown. Her body trembled, but not from weakness, from clarity. They weren't protecting the family, she said slowly. They were managing risk, Adrian replied. Another realization dawned. They thought I was powerless. Yes. Mia rested her hand over her abdomen again. 3 small lives depending on her. They tried to push me out before I had any leverage, she said. And in doing so, Adrian finished calmly, they triggered your independence. Downstairs, Christopher checked his phone repeatedly. No response. Up in the maternity room, Mia exhaled slowly. Last night, she had been the woman in the rain. Today, she understood something far more dangerous. They hadn't miscalculated her. They had miscalculated timing. The contractions returned just after midnight. Not sharp at first, just a tightening. Then another. Then a rhythm that felt different from stress. Maya was alone when the first real wave hit. She gripped the hospital rail, breath catching in her throat. The monitor beside her began to spike in uneven patterns, and within seconds, nurses rushed in. 31 weeks, one of them said quickly. Call Dr. Brooks. Mia's vision blurred as another contraction rolled through her body. Deeper this time. Undeniable. This isn't stopping, she whispered. Dr. Naomi Brooks entered already gloved, calm but moving fast. Mia, listen to me. Your body's under too much strain. We may have to deliver. Deliver? Now. Fear punched through her chest. "The babies," she started. "We're ready," Naomi assured her. "NICU is prepped." Somewhere downstairs, Christopher was still arguing with hospital security, unaware that his children were about to enter the world fighting. The room transformed in minutes. Bright surgical lights, blue drapes, controlled urgency. Mia's hands trembled as they wheeled her toward the operating room. 3 heartbeats still echoed through the monitors, but they were faster now. Fragile. Determined. As the anesthesia took effect, tears slid silently down her temples. "I'm here," Naomi said firmly near her ear. "Stay with me." Mia thought of the storm, the foyer, the silence. Then she thought of something else. Not Christopher. Not Eleanor. But the moment she had seen those 3 flickering shapes on the ultrasound screen. Life. The first cry came thin but real, then a second, then a third, weaker but unmistakable. Maya broke. A sob tore from her chest as nurses moved swiftly. Tiny bodies wrapped and rushed toward the neonatal unit. 3 boys, someone said. 3. Alive. She didn't see them long, just small faces, red and fragile, fighting for breath beneath soft oxygen hoods. But it was enough. Hours later, under dim recovery lights, Naomi returned to her bedside. "They're stable," she said gently. "Small, but strong." Maya closed her eyes, relief crashing over her in waves heavier than any contraction. Downstairs, Christopher finally received the update. His sons had been born. And for the first time since the rain began, something else was clear. No amount of money could buy back the moment he had not been there. Mia saw her sons for the first time through glass. 3 incubators lined side by side in the NICU, each one glowing under soft blue light. Tiny hands curled, translucent skin, machines breathing steady rhythm into fragile lungs. Ethan, Noah, Lucas. She whispered their names like promises. Adrian stood a respectful distance behind her, saying nothing. He understood that some moments were not meant for legal strategy. The elevator doors opened at the end of the corridor. Christopher. He walked toward her slowly, a suit jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain, not polished, not composed. "I heard," he said quietly. Mia didn't turn. "They're early," she replied, "but strong." He stepped beside her at the glass, staring at the 3 tiny lives that carried his last name. "I should have been here," he said. "Yes," she answered simply. The honesty cut deeper than accusation. Christopher swallowed. "Mia, last night, I didn't think—" "That's the problem," she interrupted calmly. "You didn't." Silence settled between them, broken only by the soft, mechanical hum of life support. He glanced over his shoulder, noticing Adrian for the first time. "Who's that?" Christopher asked. "My attorney," Mia replied. The word landed hard. Christopher's expression shifted, calculation replacing regret. "You don't need a lawyer," he said quickly. "We can handle this privately." Mia finally turned to face him. "I needed a husband," she said. The corridor felt smaller suddenly. Christopher lowered his voice. "The board is asking questions. The trust." She lifted a hand gently, stopping him. "Don't," she said. "Not here. Not in front of 3 newborn boys fighting to breathe." He exhaled, frustrated. "I'm trying to fix this." "Are you?" she asked quietly. Down the hall, a nurse adjusted one of the incubators. One of the babies stretched weakly, fingers flexing toward the glass. Mia pressed her palm against the barrier. "They don't need your fix," she said softly. "They need protection." Christopher's jaw tightened. For the first time, he understood something chilling. The woman who once waited for his approval no longer existed. And the power dynamic he thought he could reclaim had already shifted beyond his reach. 2 days after the boys were born, the Hastings family made their move. Mia was sitting beside the NICU window, a hospital blanket draped over her shoulders, when Dr. Brooks approached with a tight expression. "There's someone here asking about guardianship paperwork," Naomi said quietly. Mia's stomach dropped. "Guardianship?" Naomi nodded. "A legal representative from your husband's family." "Of course." Minutes later, Christopher walked down the corridor again, but this time he wasn't alone. A gray-haired attorney in a tailored suit followed him, carrying a slim leather briefcase. Mia stood slowly. "What is this?" she asked. Christopher avoided her eyes. "It's just temporary. The babies are premature. The board is worried about stability." "The board?" Mia repeated, disbelief threading through her voice. The attorney stepped forward smoothly. "Mrs. Caldwell, given your current medical recovery and lack of permanent residence, the Hastings family is prepared to assume temporary financial guardianship of the children. Purely administrative. Administrative. 3 human beings reduced to paperwork." Maya felt something inside her harden. "And in exchange?" she asked evenly. Christopher hesitated. The attorney answered instead. "In exchange, the family is willing to support a structured reconciliation, with trust assets integrated into the Hastings portfolio for long-term security." There it was. Not about the babies, about access. Mia glanced toward the NICU glass, where Ethan's tiny chest rose and fell in mechanical rhythm. "You threw me out in the rain," she said quietly. "Now you want my children and my inheritance under the same roof?" Christopher's voice sharpened. "Don't twist this." "I don't have to," she replied. Adrian stepped forward for the first time. "My client will not be signing anything," he said calmly, "and any attempt to pressure her during medical recovery could be interpreted as coercion." The word lingered in the air. Christopher's composure cracked. "This doesn't have to get ugly." "It already is," Mia said. A nurse adjusted one of the incubators, unaware of the war being staged outside the glass. Mia looked back at Christopher one last time. "You didn't stand up for us," she said softly. "You don't get to claim us now." And for the first time, he realized the leverage he thought he still had was gone. The petition came faster than Mia expected. 48 hours after refusing to sign the guardianship documents, she was formally served inside the hospital. Eleanor Hastings was requesting emergency custody review, citing maternal instability and lack of permanent residence. Mia read the filing twice. Maternal instability. Her hands shook, not from weakness, but disbelief. She was still recovering from surgery. Her sons were still in incubators, and the Hastings family had chosen this moment to question her fitness as a mother. "They're escalating," Adrian said calmly, as he reviewed the paperwork on his tablet. "Which means they're worried." "About the babies?" Maya asked. "No," he replied evenly. "About the trust." The emergency hearing was scheduled at Manhattan Family Court within 72 hours. Christopher did not call. Instead, Eleanor appeared on financial news that afternoon, smiling beside a ticker of Hastings Corp stock prices, projecting composure. Damage control. The hearing room felt colder than the hospital. Mia wore a simple navy dress Adrian had arranged to be delivered from a nearby boutique on Madison Avenue. No jewelry, no dramatics, just quiet presence. Across the aisle, Eleanor sat perfectly poised, pearls resting at her collarbone, legal team flanking her like polished armor. Christopher avoided Mia's gaze entirely. The Hastings attorney stood first. "Your Honor, our concern is the children's welfare. Mrs. Caldwell currently lacks stable housing and financial structure." Adrian rose slowly. "Your Honor, my client has secured independent residence effective immediately," he said, "and full financial capability." The judge adjusted her glasses. "Meaning?" Adrian placed a single document on the bench. Activation confirmation of the Arthur Caldwell Irrevocable Trust. The number was visible. $100 million. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Eleanor's composure cracked for the first time. Christopher's face drained of color. The judge leaned back slightly. So Mrs. Caldwell does not lack resources? No, Your Honor, Adrian replied. She lacks only the support she was denied. Mita felt the weight shift, not dramatically, but undeniably. For the first time since the rain, she wasn't defending herself. She was standing on solid ground. And across the room, the Hastings family understood something they had not prepared for. They were no longer negotiating from power. The second hearing was no longer quiet. No word of the trust had spread. Financial reporters lingered outside Manhattan Family Court, whispering about the Hastings name and sudden volatility in their stock. Inside the courtroom, the air felt tighter, heavier. Eleanor had changed strategy. If this is about money, her attorney began smoothly, then Mrs. Caldwell's sudden inheritance raises concerns about motive. The timing of her separation from the Hastings residence appears convenient. Convenient. Mia felt Adrian shift slightly beside her, but she remained still. The implication was clear. She had left for leverage. She had staged the exile. Adrian stood. Your Honor, if we're discussing timing, I believe context is necessary. He tapped his tablet once. The courtroom screen flickered to life. Security footage. The Hastings foyer. The marble floor gleaming under chandelier light. Mia standing near the staircase, visibly pregnant. Eleanor speaking calmly. Christopher positioned near the door. The timestamp glowed in the corner. 8:31 p.m. The audio was clearer than before. Eleanor's voice carried across the silent courtroom. If she leaves voluntarily tonight, the optics remain clean. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Christopher's voice followed, lower but unmistakable. And if she doesn't, Eleanor responded without hesitation. Then we make it uncomfortable enough that she will. The video continued, security stepping closer. Mia's shoulders tightening, Christopher turning away as the door opened. The timestamp shifted. 8:42 p.m., the moment the trust activated. The room went silent. Not dramatic silence, heavy silence, the kind that alters direction. The judge leaned forward, expression sharpening. Counsel, she said slowly to Eleanor's attorney. This appears to be coordinated removal. Eleanor's composure fractured. This is being misinterpreted, she said tightly. Adrian didn't raise his voice. The trust clause required independence from the Hastings household, he said calmly. They attempted to remove her before knowing the activation had already been triggered. The implication landed fully now. They hadn't pushed Mia out because she was unstable. They had tried to manage optics and control, and instead, they had documented their own strategy. Christopher finally looked at Mia, not with calculation, with something closer to fear. Because for the first time, the narrative wasn't about inheritance, it was about intent. And intent changes everything in court. By morning, while the Hastings name was everywhere, financial news tickers scrolled across giant screens in Times Square. Business anchors on CNBC dissected the courtroom footage frame by frame. The phrase, coordinated removal, repeated like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Hastings Corp stock dipped 5% before noon, then 8%. Inside the glass conference room on Park Avenue, board members sat rigidly around a polished walnut table. Christopher stood at the far end, jacket still on, tie pulled tight as if posture alone could hold things together. This is temporary volatility, he said. The custody issue is a private family matter. It stopped being private when the footage aired, one board member replied calmly. Investors are questioning governance ethics. Ethics. The word landed harder than the financial numbers. Eleanor entered late. I composed, but visibly strained. She placed a leather portfolio on the table with deliberate precision. "This family built its reputation over 3 generations," she said. "We are not going to let emotional theatrics dismantle it." Across Manhattan, Mia sat in a quiet, furnished apartment Adrian had secured overlooking the Hudson River. It wasn't extravagant, just clean, safe, independent. Her sons remained in the NICU, stable but small. She watched the news without sound. Christopher's image flashed briefly on the screen, walking out of the courthouse, avoiding questions. "Mr. Hastings, did you attempt to force your pregnant wife out to protect assets?" No answer. Mia muted the television entirely. This was no longer about scandal. It was about exposure. In the boardroom, another director leaned forward. "Christopher, were you aware of the trust clause?" He hesitated. That pause said enough. The chairman exhaled. "Until this stabilizes, your executive authority will be temporarily suspended." The words were clinical, clean, but devastating. Christopher's world shifted in that single sentence. Back in the apartment, Mia placed her hand gently over the small stack of NICU photos Naomi had printed for her. 3 tiny faces, 3 reasons to stand firm. She hadn't intended to dismantle a corporation. She had only wanted protection. But when powerful families gamble on control, they rarely expect consequence. And for the first time, the Hastings legacy was no longer untouchable. Christopher requested to see her alone. No attorneys, no board members, no cameras waiting outside. Mia agreed, but only in the hospital's private family consultation room, just down the hall from the NICU. Neutral ground. He arrived without his usual polish. No tailored jacket. No perfect posture. Just a man who looked like he hadn't slept. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Through the glass wall behind Mia, 3 incubators glowed softly under dim lights. Machines hummed, steady and fragile. Christopher broke first. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said. Mia studied him carefully. "How far did you think it would go?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration surfacing. "It was supposed to calm things down. My mother thought if you stepped away temporarily, she thought I was expendable," Mia finished quietly. He didn't deny it. Silence settled between them, thicker than anger. "I was trying to protect the company," he said finally. "Everything we built." Mia's expression didn't shift. "Well, what about what we built?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "I thought you'd come back," he admitted. "You always do." The honesty cut deeper than anything else. She always bent first, always apologized first, always chose peace over pride. Until the rain, Mia leaned back slightly in her chair. "You didn't stand up for me," she said. "Not as your wife, not as the mother of your children." Christopher looked toward the incubators instinctively. "I didn't know about the trust," he said, almost defensively. "That's the point," Mia replied. "You only stood still when you thought I had nothing." The room felt smaller. He swallowed hard. "Tell me what to do." For the first time, there was no strategy in his voice, just uncertainty. Mia considered him carefully. "Answer one question," she said softly. He nodded. "When your mother said, 'Make it uncomfortable enough that she leaves,' why didn't you stop her?" Christopher opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No answer came. And in that silence, Mia finally understood something that set her free. It wasn't money that had changed her position. It was clarity. And clarity doesn't negotiate with hesitation. The final custody hearing lasted less than 40 minutes, not because it was simple, but because the facts had already rearranged themselves. Mia sat straight-backed beside Adrian, hands folded calmly in her lap. She wore a tailored cream blazer over a soft blue dress. Understated, deliberate. No attempt to intimidate. no attempt to impress, just presence. Across the aisle, Eleanor's composure looked thinner than before. Christopher sat beside her, quieter now, and stripped of corporate authority and public confidence. The judge reviewed the documentation one last time. Security footage, trust activation timeline, board suspension notice, medical records from Mount Sinai confirming stress-induced premature labor. When she looked up, the courtroom felt suspended in stillness. "Mrs. Caldwell," the judge began, "this court finds no evidence of instability on your part. On the contrary, the record indicates deliberate pressure placed upon you during a medically vulnerable period." Eleanor's attorney shifted uncomfortably. The judge continued, "The request for emergency guardianship is denied." A breath moved through the room, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she said, her tone sharpening slightly, "the court strongly cautions the Hastings family against any further attempts at coercion, and such actions may warrant additional review." Coercion. The word echoed. Christopher closed his eyes briefly. Mia did not look at him. "The children will remain under the sole legal and physical custody of their mother," the judge concluded. "Visitation arrangements may be established once stability is demonstrated." The gavel struck once. Clean. Final. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited again. Questions flew as Mia exited with Adrian at her side. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you consider this a victory?" She paused just long enough to answer. "It's not a victory," she said calmly. "It's protection." Across the street, Christopher watched from a distance, not beside her, not shielding her, just watching. The board of Hastings Corp. Released a statement that afternoon announcing executive restructuring. Eleanor's honorary chair position was under review. For the first time in weeks, Mia felt something unfamiliar settle into her chest. Not relief, not triumph. Stability. And when she returned to the NICU later that evening, she placed her hand gently against the glass and whispered to her sons, "It's just us now." The penthouse overlooked the Hudson River. Not flashy, not ostentatious, just high enough that the city felt quieter from above. Mia stood barefoot near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the early evening sun washing the living room in soft gold. The space was newly furnished. Neutral tones, warm wood, clean lines, nothing inherited, nothing borrowed, everything chosen. For the first time in months, the silence around her felt safe. The boys were still in the NICU, gaining strength day by day. Ethan had begun gripping the nurse's finger. Noah's breathing had stabilized without assistance. Lucas, the smallest, was fighting the hardest. But fighting. Mia checked the live NICU camera feed on her phone, watching their tiny chests rise and fall in synchronized rhythm. 3 lives. 3 reasons she had not broken. Behind her, Adrian stepped into the room, setting a slim folder down on the kitchen island. "The title transfer is complete," he said calmly. "This property is fully under your name." Mia turned slightly. "No joint oversight?" "None," he replied. "Independent ownership." The word carried weight. She walked slowly across the hardwood floor, fingertips brushing the cool stone countertop. The apartment wasn't purchased to prove anything. It wasn't retaliation. It was security. Christopher had tried calling again the night before, a brief message this time. "I'm not fighting you anymore." She hadn't responded. This wasn't about war. It was about boundaries. Adrian moved toward the window, keeping a respectful distance. "You could have made this public. A press conference. A statement." Mia shook her head gently. "I don't need spectacle," she said. "I need stability." Below them, boats moved quietly along the river. The Manhattan skyline stretched in clean lines, indifferent but enduring. For the first time, Mia understood something deeper than victory. Money had shifted the balance, but independence had shifted her. She rested her hand lightly over her abdomen, no longer carrying life, but still carrying responsibility. When her sons came home, this would be their beginning. Not in a townhouse built on control, but in a space built on choice. And that difference would shape everything. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, soft gold light reflecting against polished marble floors. It was the kind of room where power usually whispered behind champagne glasses and silk gowns. Tonight, it belonged to Mia. She stood near the center of the stage, not in diamonds, not draped in spectacle, just a simple ivory gown, her hair pulled back, posture steady. Behind her, a screen displayed 3 small footprints side by side. Ethan, Noah, Lucas. The room quieted as she stepped toward the microphone. 3 months ago, she began, her voice calm but clear. I was standing in the rain outside a home that no longer wanted me. A murmur moved gently through the crowd. I was pregnant, and I was alone, and I believed I had lost everything. Across the ballroom, donors, business leaders, and journalists listened, not to scandal, but to transformation. The Triple Hope Foundation, she continued, is not about wealth. It's about protection for women who are financially controlled, legally cornered, or emotionally erased. The screen shifted to statistics, economic dependency rates, legal resource shortages, housing insecurity numbers. This foundation will fund emergency legal representation, independent housing grants, and neonatal medical support for mothers under coercive pressure. Applause rose, not explosive, but sincere. Adrian stood near the back of the room, watching quietly. He had advised against public events at first. Too soon, too visible. But Mia understood something he didn't. Silence had protected the wrong people for too long. A reporter raised a hand. Mrs. Caldwell, is this a response to your former in-laws? Mia met the question without flinching. It's a response to a system that assumes women will stay quiet. Across Manhattan, Eleanor Hastings watched the live stream from her dim office, expression unreadable. For the first time, the narrative wasn't about corporate stock or courtroom drama. It was about impact. When the final pledge numbers appeared on the screen, the total surpassed $5 million in additional funding. Mia stepped down from the stage slowly. This wasn't revenge. It was redirection. And in a city that once watched her walk into a storm, she was now building shelter for others. The boys came home in early spring. The penthouse, once quiet and echoing, and now pulsed with soft sounds, monitors humming gently, lullabies playing low from a speaker near the crib, the occasional fragile cry cutting through the night. Ethan slept with one fist curled near his cheek. Noah kicked constantly, restless even in dreams. Lucas, the smallest, needed the most attention. But he was gaining weight, inch by inch. Mia moved between the cribs with practiced calm, adjusting blankets, checking breathing patterns, memorizing every detail. There was a knock at the door. Adrian stepped back as Christopher entered slowly, holding no flowers this time, no prepared speeches, just quiet tension. This was court-approved visitation. Christopher approached the crib cautiously, as if proximity required permission. "They're bigger," he said softly. "Yes," Mia replied. He leaned closer, studying their faces. Something in him shifted visibly. Less pride, more realization. No cameras, no board members, no Eleanor. Just 3 small boys. Lucas stirred first, tiny eyes blinking open. He stared upward at the unfamiliar figure hovering above him. Christopher swallowed. "I'm your dad," he whispered. Ethan let out a faint cry. Mia instinctively stepped closer, but stopped herself. Christopher reached carefully, placing a hesitant finger near Lucas's palm. The baby gripped it immediately, reflexive, strong. That simple contact broke something open. "I thought I had time," Christopher said quietly, eyes fixed on their son. Time to fix things, time to control it. Mia watched him, expression steady. "Control what?" she asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he looked up at her. "I didn't protect you," he admitted. "Oh, no, and I didn't protect them." There it was. Not strategy, not negotiation. Truth. Lucas made a small sound, almost like a sigh, and released his grip. Christopher straightened slowly, the weight of understanding settling into his shoulders. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. Mia nodded once. "This isn't about punishment," she replied. "It's about responsibility." Christopher looked at the 3 cribs one last time. For the first time, he understood that power wasn't inherited. It was proven. And he had failed when it mattered most. 1 year later, the Hudson River looked different. Or maybe Mia did. She stood on the penthouse balcony just after sunset, the Manhattan skyline stretching wide and golden beneath a fading sky. Inside, soft laughter drifted through open glass doors. Ethan had just taken his first steps that afternoon. Noah had discovered how to clap for himself. Lucas, once the smallest fighter, now babbled non-stop, determined to be heard. The apartment no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like home. The Triple Hope Foundation had expanded into 3 states. Emergency housing grants were active. Legal clinics were staffed. Neonatal partnerships were growing. Quietly, steadily. No spectacle, just structure. Adrian stepped onto the balcony beside her, sleeves rolled back, tie gone. He wasn't there as her attorney anymore. He hadn't been for months. He had stayed through late-night feedings, through medical scares, through foundation meetings, through silence that didn't feel heavy. He stood beside her now without needing to speak. "You did this," he said softly. Mia shook her head. "We did this," she corrected. Behind them, the boys squealed as a nanny gently redirected them away from a toppled stack of building blocks. Christopher still visited. Not often, but consistently. He no longer arrived with negotiation in his posture. Only humility. He paid support without argument. He never spoke Eleanor's name. As for Eleanor, she had resigned quietly from all public positions. The board had replaced her. Hastings Corp survived. Smaller, humbler, scrutinized. Power, once assumed permanent, had recalibrated. Mia rested her arms against the cool balcony railing. "I used to think strength meant endurance," she said quietly. "Staying, absorbing, surviving." Adrian glanced at her. "And now?" "Now, I think it means choosing differently." He studied her for a long moment, then reached into his pocket. No grand gesture, no staged moment, just a simple velvet box. "If choose again," he said gently. Inside, the ring was understated, elegant, honest. Mia didn't answer immediately. She looked back through the open doors at her sons, safe, laughing, protected. Then she looked at the skyline that had once watched her walk into the rain. "Yes," she said. Not because she needed saving, but because she was no longer afraid. So, that's how the story closes. And if you're still here right now, truly still here, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a quiet way. Mia's story isn't really about money. It isn't even about revenge. It's about clarity. It's about the moment a person realizes they don't have to beg to be protected. They don't have to shrink to be loved. They don't have to stay where they are, only tolerated. The Stoic philosophy teaches us something powerful. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Marcus Aurelius. Mia couldn't control the storm, the exile, or the silence of her husband, but she could control her response. She chose dignity over drama, structure over chaos, protection over pride. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Sometimes strength is not fighting louder, it's walking away cleaner. Sometimes healing isn't forgetting the pain, it's using it to build something better. If you're listening to this and you feel seen, maybe you're in your own quiet storm right now. Just remember, independence begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. If this story meant something to you, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Someone else out there might need this reminder too. And I'm really glad you stayed until the end. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, inspiration, and educational reflection purposes only. The characters, events, corporations, and legal situations portrayed in this video are entirely imagined and are not intended to represent any real individuals, families, or companies. While the story includes realistic themes such as financial control, legal disputes, and family conflict, it does not provide legal, financial, or medical advice. Any references to real locations in New York City or recognizable institutions are used solely as part of the fictional setting to enhance storytelling authenticity. Viewers should not interpret this content as factual reporting or documentary material. The purpose of this video is to explore themes of resilience, independence, personal growth, and accountability in a dramatic format.